God's grace and peace be with you today. Amen. It's my privilege to be able to consider with you a gospel reading that is perhaps the favorite or one of the favorites in the Christian scriptures, and that is the feeding of the 5,000. It is the only miracle story of Jesus, other than the resurrection, that is carried in the books of all four gospel writers. But before we enter the scene specific to the day, let's think about some of our own challenges and where Jesus was at this time. We as a country, a city, have been suffering from the deaths of people through COVID, economic and job loss, and also issues of race and discrimination, violence, and political concerns. The company of our brother Jesus may help us. As the World War II era pastor and theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, perhaps only a suffering God can help. For many of us, again, losses through death. And Jesus, just before his arrival on the scene, had been taking time alone to heal and to pray because of the loss of his cousin and fellow preacher, John the Baptist. Secondly, Jesus had job problems in a sense. He had been to preach and teach and heal at his home temple in Nazareth, and while the people found him wise and wonderful, the temple authorities said, "You are not welcome here." Jesus did not have a place to lay his head. He did not have a temple where he could anchor his ministry. Thirdly, people around us are suffering because of discrimination, violence, etc. Jesus, remember, was a Jew in a Roman-occupied land. It was said that Herod was interested in meeting with him, and this was not good news. He was sometimes seen as the reincarnated John the Baptist, but John was seen as a troublemaker. And remember, it was Herod who had permitted John's beheading. So as Isaiah said of the Messiah, surely he has known our griefs and carried our sorrows. Having prayed and rested, however, Jesus was able to come ashore to the crowd and in his feelings of compassion spend a good portion of the day healing and teaching. He was with his disciples, and as the day wore on, they began to notice that the crowd was worn and hungry. There was no food available. It appeared there were no vendors. There was no money. Jesus had the disciples seat the crowd and look at what resources might be available. According to the book of John, only one young child came forward with 5 small barley loaves and 2 fish. This was a favorite story of mine when I was a young child. A child was featured giving Jesus the elements in order to bless them and create a miracle. Most interpreters agree that the great part of the miracle was the sharing that took place. Through the child's enthusiasm and faith in Jesus' holy blessing, people's hearts were opened. They would not have come to a place like this without provisions for the day. It was a wilderness area, just as we would not go to a place to hike for the day where there were no vendors without bringing food. But the people had been afraid that they did not have enough to share, and then their eyes were opened. This story has come to mind fairly often in the last couple of weeks, and there have been opportunities to give unanticipated. The Cleveland Food Bank, for example, sent out notice that someone had given a matching funds grant. And while I usually give to the food bank at the holiday time, I thought this is a good time to give, and perhaps I will have more to give in the holidays. Nancy Sherwin from this congregation had let us know that St. Luke's on the near west side needed provisions. Many of us were able to provide, and I found that I had a bike in the garage that I considered selling, but maybe would be a good gift. Someone might need it for transportation or enjoy it at St. Luke's. There's nothing world-shaking in my discoveries, only that my ears were opened because of the gospel and the word of others. So what are we to take away? We are today together in spirit to be fed, to be healed, and to be strengthened by word and sacrament like the people on the shores of Galilee. Thanks be to God. If we are burdened with grief, worry, or fear, we can take time, as Jesus did, to pray. This is a good time to look at our spiritual resources and practices. The church has groups, spirituality for men and women, and other resources to help us learn to pray and to discern. Thirdly, no one is too young or too humble to share what we have and have it blessed by God for the good of God's people. We're a community called to demonstrate our love by example and to feed and help others in remembrance of Jesus. God grant us grace and be with us. Amen.